What's going on, everybody? James Hancock here. Last night I was able to get into an early screening of Red Sparrow up at the Film Society at Lincoln Center. The movie comes out on March 2nd and it's based on a novel by Jason Matthews and is directed by Francis Lawrence. I don't know if there's any blood relation between the two Lawrences, but this Lawrence directed Jennifer Lawrence in Catching Fire and Mockingjay Part 1 and 2. I don't know what you think about Mockingjay 1 and 2. I thought they basically tried to stretch too little story into two giant overstuffed movies, but Red Sparrow is a chance for both Francis Lawrence as well as Jennifer Lawrence to really switch gears creatively, because this is a movie with a hard R. It is an almost kind of classic espionage thriller, but it has tons of sex and violence. And I think it shows that Jennifer Lawrence at this point in her career is at least seeking material that doesn't involve her dressing up as a superhero like Mystique or like Katniss and running around beating people up. As an actress, she wants fresh challenges, and I think when she gets a movie like Silver Linings Playbook or American Hustle, she really shows what she can do as an actress. But Red Sparrow, unfortunately, is a bit of a mixed bag. There are times where the movie really works, and there are times where the movie really doesn't. But before I get into any specifics, I'll just speak in broad generalities initially. But Jennifer Lawrence plays a Russian ballerina named Dominika, and after she breaks her leg on stage, she no longer has the ability to look after her mother, who requires a lot of medical assistance. And through her uncle, she basically enrolls in this thing called the Sparrow program. And the Sparrow program takes young, beautiful females as well as young, beautiful males and turns them into spies and covert operatives. It's like a weird mix between covert operative and prostitute, because they go out and they use sex in order to extract information from various targets while working undercover. And one of her first major assignments is to try to extract information from the character played by Joel Edgerton, who works for the CIA, and he basically has an operative in Russia, and Dominika's higher-ups want to figure out who that operative might actually be. The plot thickens, though, when Jennifer Lawrence and Joel Edgerton, of course, fall in love, and she wants to possibly defect from the Russians over to the Americans. But in the typical tradition of spy thrillers, you never quite know, is she a Russian masquerading as somebody feeding information to the Americans, or is she an American informant masquerading somebody working for the Russians? And that's part of the fun of the movie. And I will say this, the first half of the movie has a lot of thrills, a lot of excitement, a lot of titillation, a lot of violence. Basically, her training to become a sparrow underneath the rather strict tutelage of the great Charlotte Rampling, those scenes probably played the best, where they're basically teaching her about how everybody's a giant puzzle, and that basically your goal is to figure out what that missing piece is, supply it, and then they'll basically fall under your spell. Where the movie starts to fall apart is with the love story, as well as just the basic mechanics of the actual plot as it unfolds in the latter part of the story. And there were times where I could hear people in the audience snickering and giggling at these really awkward moments. I feel like I'm tap dancing around some specific scenes that I really want to discuss. So before I get to my spoilers, I'll just say this is a mixed bag. It is an inconsistent movie. There are times where it is wildly entertaining. There are times where it's good, trashy fun, but inconsistent storytelling, as well as a lot of cringe-inducing Russian accents on the part of a lot of the actors involved in the movie. But it definitely trips over its feet from time to time, preventing it from becoming the great spy thriller that it so desperately wants to be. And my fear is that if Red Sparrow does not perform, it will basically remove the incentive of Hollywood studios making R-rated content with movie stars. I feel like every time Hollywood makes a movie that's R-rated that does not perform, they blame the R rating and retreat back to the safety and confines of the PG-13 family-friendly entertainment, when what they really should blame is poor execution. And I think there's a lot about Red Sparrow where it's just flawed execution. Having now seen 4 movies by Francis Lawrence, I just don't think he's a very good director. I know the Hunger Games movies made piles of money, but I saw all of them, and the 3 that are directed by Francis Lawrence I think are the weakest of the movies. And I applaud both he and Jennifer Lawrence taking on this kind of material and trying to stretch their wings creatively, but judged on its own merits and judging it on what it sets out to achieve as a story, I can't give this movie a full-throated recommendation. It's long, it's 2 hours and 19 minutes. It could have easily been an hour 50 or an hour 45. I mean, 3 to 6 more months of post-production would not have hurt this movie at all. In any case, let's talk about some specifics. So let's start with Jennifer Lawrence, who obviously is the star of this movie, and I feel like this movie, whether it succeeds or fails, rests mostly on her shoulders. And I'll say this, she's never appeared more beautiful, more confident, more lethal, more cold and cunning. She got in terrific shape for this movie, and the character of Dominika allows her to show a ton of range, both as a prima ballerina as well as a cadet in training, and eventually as essentially like a supercharged sexual mega spy. However, her Russian accent leaves a little bit to be desired. I'm not an expert on Eastern European languages and accents, but her accent kind of comes and goes, and there are times where she just talks like the Jennifer Lawrence that we know and love, and there are other times where it's a little bit of a caricature, and for me, nearly every single time she speaks with a Russian accent, it was a distraction, and it threw me out of the movie. Decades ago, Hollywood, what they would do is they basically just hire a bunch of British actors, and those British actors would they could do German accents or Russian actors or whatever, and they would have all the Americans do the American thing, and I almost feel like this movie would have been better if Jennifer Lawrence had played a CIA operative and just used her normal accent and just flip all the nationalities. It actually doesn't really matter whether she's Russian or American or whatever, but she's a spy who hates her employers. And there's also a weird thing where the movie, every once in a while, will have people speak in Russian with subtitles, but otherwise, all the scenes that take place in Russia, everybody's just speaking English to each other with Russian accents. It's just stylistically confusing and inconsistent, and it's one of several areas that kind of invites ridicule. But it sounds like I'm bashing the movie. I have to admit, for the first half of the movie, I was completely 100% totally on board. I love action movies and thrillers that are geared towards adults and not towards 13-year-old children. I haven't been a 13-year-old child in a very, very long time, and when I see violence and sex in movies, I want it to be totally uncensored. I want it to be something that shocks me out of my complacency, and there are some early scenes that are largely successful on that front. When the character of Dominika learns that her leg was broken on purpose by one of her jealous rivals, basically another ballerina in the company has a male dancer leap into the air and land on her leg, destroying her career. And when she finds out what's going on, even though she's still recovering from surgery, she goes into the steam room where these two ballerinas are having sex, and Jennifer Lawrence basically nearly beats them to death and breaks their jaws and breaks their legs. I mean, it's a horrific scene, but it's also tinged with a little bit of erotica because you have these two beautiful statuesque dancers who are completely stark-ass naked involved in the scene. We also have some great scenes in the Sparrow training where Dominika is learning to psych people out. One of our many responsibilities as an agent will be to read people, figure out what's missing, and figure out the way that she can use that to her advantage. And so both the male and female cadets in the Sparrow program are subjected to all sorts of really humiliating, embarrassing experiences in order to help them build up their confidence. But there's this one guy who is a total savage who actually tries to rape Dominika. He is unsuccessful because Dominika basically takes a shower handle and nearly beats him to death. And Charlotte Rampling and Jeremy Irons and the rest of the trainers, they use this as an opportunity to really test and see what Dominika is capable of. And they put together this demonstration for the class where they basically demand that Dominika give the rapist what he wants. But Dominika turns the tables because she's able to understand that the attempted rapist, what he really wants is control and domination. So what she does is she deprives him of that. She strips fully nude, although it's partially concealed by somebody's shoulder, and she psychs him out in a way where he becomes completely impotent and kind of crumbles. And it's a great little moment where, through psychology and confidence, she's able to completely disarm her would-be attacker. So during those scenes, I was sitting back and thinking, wow, this movie's got a really hard edge, and this movie's really aggressive, and it's quite shocking, it's quite controversial. I was really on board. But then the movie shifts to Budapest, where the espionage portion begins, where Jennifer Lawrence and Joel Edgerton start falling in love and trying to get information out of each other. And you have two scenes that might be the most awkward sex scenes ever caught on film. They have about as much romance and excitement as watching people put away their groceries in a cupboard. They seemingly happen at random, they're totally devoid of passion, and they end as quickly as they begin, and they just feel really thrown in. I'm never one to say cut sex scenes from movies. I like to see sex scenes in movies. I think far too few movie stars are willing to do sex scenes. But when these scenes played, I just was kind of sitting back like, what? They're executed so poorly, they make you feel embarrassed for everybody involved. The cameraman, the director, the actors. And if you were to remove those two scenes, nobody would miss them. Now, when it comes to the plot, I'm not quite sure if the incoherent kind of sloppiness to the storytelling stems from the novel or if it stems from the adaptation. Justin Hathey adapted the novel into a screenplay, but either some scenes were cut in order to bring it down to the already overly long 2 hours, 19 minutes, or is just not very well written, but the movie gets a little sloppy and a little incoherent. And while at times it does look like a beautiful, polished, elegant thriller, there are other times where the scenes just feel like they were staged by an amateur or a filmmaker who doesn't know what they're doing. If you're making these kind of movies, the holy grail of what you're trying to achieve is something like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I feel like that movie was absolutely sensational. And when it comes to spy thrillers, Red Sparrow definitely falls way short of that. But there are some scenes involving violence and brutality that will catch your attention. At one point, the CIA and the Russians are basically trying to manipulate and get information out of somebody who's the chief of staff for an important senator. And there's this horrific scene where a truck kills her out of the blue. And it was so abrupt and so shocking that I literally screamed in terror and surprise. I was like, whoa! And I think even some of the people around me were kind of laughing at me for having that response. And there's a particularly brutal scene toward the end where Joel Edgerton's being tortured by this crazy Russian whose technique is to peel off pieces of your skin. And it's pretty brutal. He has this, it's almost like a potato skinner, and he's pulling off pieces. And Jennifer Lawrence is kind of playing along with it before she and Joel Edgerton team up in order to kill the torturer. It's a really ruthless scene with people getting hacked and slashed all over. So if people want to see some shocking violence in a spy thriller format, it definitely delivers on that front. And the movie does leave the door open for more stories set in this universe. Basically, Jennifer Lawrence has climbed the ranks in her organization and has achieved enormous power and influence. But something tells me that people are not going to be screaming for more Red Sparrow movies. As much as I love and admire Jennifer Lawrence as an actress, I think she's incredibly talented and incredibly beautiful. She sometimes does have an adversarial relationship both with the press and her fans. And I think anybody who's been into the public eye as much as she has, it's inevitable that some people are going to rub you the wrong way and you're going to occasionally lash out or say things in a way where you regret it perhaps a little bit later. But I have a feeling some of the enemies that Jennifer Lawrence has accumulated and some of the haters that she has already, they're going to be sharpening their knives and ready to come out and just blast her out of the water for this movie, because it does have scenes that open her up to ridicule. And I have a feeling that Jennifer Lawrence is never going to want to hear the two words Red Sparrow ever again after some of her haters have had their moment in the sun ripping this movie to pieces. I don't think that it's a movie that should be ripped to pieces. There's plenty about this movie that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I would love to see more Hollywood movie stars willing to take on this kind of edgy material. But the sad reality is execution is important, and the execution of this script and the way it's staged and the way that it's directed, it's a mixed bag. I can't remember where I read this, but somebody basically said that it's not trashy enough for people who want trashy entertainment, and it's not slick and polished enough for people who want slick and polished. It's kind of this weird hybrid between the two, and in the end, it leaves you with a slightly unsatisfied feeling. But I will say this, I thought about the movie quite a bit on the subway ride home, and when I got up this morning, I was still thinking about it, so it clearly had an impact. I just can't give it a full-throated recommendation to people because it just drops the ball on too many fronts for me to do so. But if you're curious, or if you're a Jennifer Lawrence fan, or if you just want to see some hardcore sex and violence, definitely give it a try. But that's about the only endorsement that I can give for Red Sparrow. In any case, I hope you enjoyed this reaction and review. Please consider giving my channel a subscribe. I would greatly appreciate it. If you want to talk more, leave a comment in the comments below or give me a shout on Twitter @Colbrax. But thank you so much for watching my video. I really appreciate it, and I'll talk to y'all soon.